Okay, everyone, welcome to this second podcast in the series where Wanyan, Clive Holtham, and myself, David Gurteen, discuss various aspects of artificial intelligence, but I think particularly on thinking, on learning, on collaboration, and I think more than anything on sort of the impact on society. So, this is much less of a technological podcast than a human one, shall we say. And the theme for this podcast is what is conversation in the age of AI? So, what is conversation in the age of AI? And I should just say a few words about what we mean by conversation. We often talk about having conversations with an AI, but all we're doing is exchanging text messages. A conversational text messages in some ways an oxymoron more than anything. We're talking about human conversations. We're talking about voice conversations. If you're familiar with the voice mode on ChatGPT, that's what we're talking about. Proper human to AI conversations, shall we say. That's what we're talking about. And we're probably talking about conversations where we have those conversations one-to-one with the AI, but I think more interestingly is group conversations, say with an AI avatar. So you could imagine, Ron, myself, and Clive being joined by an AI avatar on this screen right now that actually took part in this conversation, and to all intents and purposes was, dare I say it, human. Yes. So this is what we want to talk about, and again, just talk about maybe some of the psychological aspects and some of the social aspects of those sorts of conversations, because I think we're going to end up. This is going to become a very integral part of our lives. So I've got a few questions here that I'd like to discuss, and I'm sure Ron and Clive have. But the first one I would like to address, I think it's probably the most important one, is do we think AI at the moment, ChatGPT, Claude, and the like, are actually capable of having proper, I'm going to call them human conversations or human-like conversations. So Ron, what's your immediate thought about that? Yeah,
My
exactly.
immediate thoughts is I have conversations with my AI every day. I have conversations with 4 AIs. As you know, I'm researching and looking at OpenAI and Claude and Gemini and DeepSeek now, and I should be looking more at
Are these voice conversations, Ron?
the voice conversations, but
Oh, okay.
it's more than that. Let me just say beforehand, conversation is fundamental to humanity, isn't it? I think we
Yeah.
all accept and realize that, but we that's how we inform one another. That's how we learn from one another. That's how we cooperate with one another. That's how we can collaborate with one another. That's how we can create knowledge. That's how everything is based on conversation with humans, language and conversation. So the first thing I would say about it in this talk is I don't think AI is going to replace human conversation. AI is automating and replacing lots of things, but it's certainly not going to replace conversation because it's fundamental to human beings, absolutely fundamental. So what I'm talking about is how it augments it and
Yeah.
how it can do things that human to human can't do in their conversations that I believe AI can do in its conversations with people. Give you one quick example, and that's immediate language translation. Right now, AI enables somebody in Japan, my colleague Naoki in Japan could talk to me. He could speak Japanese and I would hear it in English instantly. We have a conversation augmented by AI, which we couldn't do before so easily, unless we learn.
And of course, we've got the ability now to do that in real time. So
Real
it's
time is what I mean. Yes, real time.
yeah,
So for me, it's fundamentally, it certainly will not replace. So I'll only be talking about how I think it improves. But to answer your first question, yes, I have a conversation every day with AI, and you referred to AI joining our conversations. I've even seen demonstrations, but not tried it myself yet, although I'd like to, of AIs having conversations with AIs.
Each other, yes.
And isn't that interesting? Because humans get a little bit bored after a bit of time, or we need to go to sleep. But AIs could keep feeding one another forever. So I find that extraordinary. But
We can come back to this, but I particularly
yeah,
want to focus at some point on the quality of those conversations. How good
quality, yeah.
is the quality of those conversations? Is it what I'd call "quote unquote" a real conversation? But let's hear what Clive's got to say about this.
Well, I don't use voice as often as Ron. I do use it regularly. I'm using it through ChatGPT plus the advanced voice mode.
Yeah,
And where I particularly use it is where it's not so much for like fact finding, if I can call it like that, is where perhaps I'm not completely clear on what it is I want. And it is a totally different way of interacting with ChatGPT and text. It's utterly and totally different. It does have the feel actually of a human-to-human conversation. Now, I am totally 100% aware that this entity I'm interacting with is not human. But the fact that it is able to engage with me purely through voice, as opposed to text, leads to an utterly different form of relationship with the large language model.
yeah.
So
yeah.
I, if you like, I choose exactly when I'm going to use it for a specific purpose, rather than use it as, I'm perhaps not such an expert as Ron in using it routinely. I use it in specific circumstances, and it is excellent. I mean, the nature of the dialogue is free flowing. It can be a little bit irritating at times. I wish I had more choice of the voice that was being given to
Yes,
me.
yeah.
But nonetheless, I can have an additional type of relationship with the LLM using voice.
I think what's interesting is let's just share an experience of mine, because I agree with you, Clive. When I have a conversation with ChatGPT advanced voice mode, for example, it feels very real and very satisfying, and it's just amazing, in terms of just sort of provoking my thinking. But the question I had in my head was just how good is that conversation? And let's just give you a little example. Just a few days ago, maybe a week or so ago, there was a report published where I guess it was a university research team had looked at the impact of using an AI as a therapist. And the bottom line was that people preferred AI as a therapist to a real qualified human therapist, which I found interesting. And so I thought, well, I've never really used an AI ChatGPT as a therapist. I thought, well, let's try this myself. Let's share with it some of my psychological problems and issues, and see what it has to say. And as I was doing it, I realized something pretty quickly. Is what it was doing, it wasn't having a real nuanced conversation with me. It was reinforcing a lot of what could be considered my prejudices. So if I had a problem with another person, it was totally agreeing with me, and it was giving me very good advice as to what I should do, maybe in dealing with that person. and advice that I would give myself or anybody else. But what it wasn't doing, it wasn't questioning what part I was playing in that relationship. What biases I had, what assumptions I was making, whether the problem was more with me than the other person. It didn't do any of that. It just helped me double down on my pre-existing beliefs. And I thought, yeah, it's not, if it's doing that as a AI therapist, it's not really a high quality human conversation. I'm just wondering what both of you make of that little story.
I'd like to say something about that and even challenge that a bit, because I agree with what you said, David, about ChatGPT's, the generative AI models, because what they learned to do right in the beginning, even when you go back to the early models, Eliza and the like, was to simply mirror what we said.
Yeah.
And that's what a therapist does a lot of the time, where appropriate.
Yeah.
But here's where I would suggest something different. What we're now talking about since December last year, I know Clive has some reservations on the word as well, but we're talking about reasoning systems now. Conversation isn't just about mirroring, it's also about reasoning as well.
Yes.
And what I do when I have worked since December, just a couple of months really, with these, my conversations are, it's reasoning, because I'm wanting to learn more about how they reason. I ask them in every prompt I do, I ask them something, and then I say, and can you explain to me step by step how you came to that conclusion? That's my standard. Simple as that.
Now, what's good about this is that now you're actually questioning the AI. You are open-minded, and you want it to maybe question you and challenge you.
Yeah.
My view is that when a lot of people do it, they are happy with the AI because it
Okay. All right.
isn't challenging them. It's confirming their pre-existing beliefs that may well be totally wrong.
Yes. Yes. I accept
It comes down to our use. It comes down to our individual sort of attitude towards it, as to how helpful it is or how harmful it might be.
Yes, indeed. I will accept that. But as a result of asking that question,
Yeah,
because I'm really interested in how it comes. It goes through the steps and says, well, the first thing I try to do is to understand the context better. And then I see what information I've got to go out and get. And then I try to develop the different perspectives. And then I try to then balance them, come up to some sort of judgment, right?
Mm.
And it's doing that in context and telling me how it's thinking and what it's thinking. And I've discovered that it's actually come up with things I hadn't thought of,
Yeah.
completely.
One of the things I do a great deal now, and this is not usually in voice. Well, it's in voice and text. I'll ask a question, or I will give it a statement that I believe, and it'll give me a response. And then I'll say, how might I be wrong? How might I be wrong?
Yeah.
And then what comes back is
Yeah.
usually quite devastating. It tells
Yes.
so many ways what
Critical
my assumptions
thinking.
are, what my biases are. And it's a little bit scary and a little bit unnerving at times. Have
Yep.
you played with this sort of aspect of it, Clive?
I do want to draw your attention to the fact that the so-called research into the therapy issue
Mm.
is highly contested from within
Okay.
the professions. Now, you can obviously understand why it's highly contested, but I don't think we should be relying on, the odd study here or there to reach profound conclusions
Right.
about AI as a therapist. It can obviously give the impression of being an excellent therapist, but you'd have to do trials way beyond the sort of what we've seen so far to identify that as one way or the other. I'd like to slightly shift our discussion towards human to human conversation.
Yeah.
Because one of my feelings at the moment is that the machines are going to replace an awful lot of, let's call it factual conversation, even, in education. Machines are going to be able to interact with humans in a quite a responsive way when we're dealing with low-level issues, factual issues. But if you look in domestically, in our social lives and in our work lives, and especially as citizens, we are in a profound crisis in many ways in the area of conversation. This is obviously, a lot of this is to do with social media.
Yeah.
I'm on a local social media group where I want to find out about getting my garden fixed or my drains cleaned, and suddenly up pops antisocial comments of various types. So civilized conversation hasn't particularly been enhanced by social media.
Yeah.
And you've clearly got many people now who are ranting via social media who kept that local to themselves, but now they're being amplified. So I really want to create a new emphasis on more effective human-to-human conversation, both in the domestic, work, and citizen spheres. And although I think AI has a role to play, including all the things we've talked about, including using AI as a conversationalist itself, I'm very, very worried that conversation, which is fundamental to our sort of keeping ourselves and our families and our societies together, is in huge danger of being degraded through technology.
So do you think that's, I must admit, you're absolutely right about this, and I've not maybe given it as much thought as I should. But my first thought as you're talking is how an AI could act as a moderator to some degree in a conversation, that when things start to become polarized or ad hominem attacks, it politely corrects us. As my immediate thoughts. I mean, have you thought beyond that?
I'm thinking now that we're in huge danger of losing our genetic inbuilt conversational skill, which has kept societies together over millennia.
Right, and that's been a like a function. It's social media that has tended to degrade and corrupt that.
Well, it's not only social media; it's the mass media as well, and it's the nature of the dialogue one sees daily, on our TV screens or phones. So I can see a point where conversational skills, human-to-human conversational skills, are significantly degraded.
So how do you think AI could help? I guess is my question.
I think AI is as much part of the problem.
It could make things worse.
Of course, we could use any tool or technology, but at the moment, AI is a negative in terms of this authentic interpersonal skill of conversation and dialogue. So I'm taking a harder and harder line on it. I believe we need in higher education certainly to include dialogue, conversation, and human-to-human conflict resolution.
Wonderful.
As
I'm all for that, given my interest in conversational leadership.
Topics.
Absolutely. Oh, if it helps do that, that's amazing. We should talk some more about that. But Ron, you must have some thoughts on this.
Yes, indeed. I was listening the other day to Mo Gaudat, who I rather like some of his approaches, and people were discussing the two top skills that humans could learn, or the top 3 or 4 that really will help humans in this world of AI. And the first one was the more obvious one. Well, you've got to understand what they are by using them, first of all. So just get stuck in and play with them. That's number one. And when you play with them and you learn yourself what it means for you, the second skill that he mentioned, which I resonated with, because that's what you've just been saying and Clive has been saying, learn to debate, debate, debate. Critical thinking, debating, the art of conversation. If anything, AI has put the focus on, as Clive has just put the focus on, the need for humans to get back that art of conversation, or even more. So
I would add, it's not just about debate, because debate's about winning and losing by and large. It's
I
about,
agree with that.
about
Yeah,
dialogue,
yeah,
about
dialogue.
dialectic.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, we need to develop those discourse skills, if you will.
I prefer dialogue also, but you know the point I'm making.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with debate. I mean, it's choosing horses for courses.
It's interesting, Ron, that two key, I'm in favor of substantially increasing the use of AI in education, but the price, in a sense, to pay for that is that two new curriculum areas need to be developed. One is the conversation and dialogue, which we've talked about, and the other is what I'm calling critical inquiry. I'm not using the term critical thinking because that has already become a debased term, and a critical inquiry means a deep skepticism and challenge, because now take a PhD thesis, it is going to be already almost impossible to decide whether a PhD thesis, how far it's genuinely authentically produced by the learner.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that, if that's an acid test, we need to have critical thinking, which is independent of technology, as a new, I mean, it's actually always been there, but it becomes vital in an era of AI and misinformation.
I totally agree with you on that.
Gentlemen, we should probably draw to a close here, but I'm thinking we should continue this conversation in our third podcast because we've hardly scratched the surface. I really like the points that Clive has just made. So shall we stop here for now?
All right.
Just really quickly from each of us, we can just share maybe one insight with each other, something that maybe we hadn't thought about before this conversation. Ron, you got an insight there?
I think in this conversation, it would be the impact that AI, conversations within AI have on our society, have on relationships.
Yes.
I see the relationship with the AI, the relationship with people, and the relationship between AI and people fundamentally change and important. So that's what I would say from this session.
Yeah, let me just speak before I turn to Clive, because the thing I'm taking away is what Clive has just said, the need to teach dialogue and more in our universities, because this is really close to my heart, and I hadn't quite fully appreciated that up until now. So that's been a tremendous insight for me. But Clive, has Ron or I said anything that sort of inspired you in any way?
I'm just thinking about this podcast here. The three of us have been AI free in the conversation, as far as I can tell. We've been actively listening to each other. I mean, it's up to viewers to decide whether we are avatars in one way or another. But I'm totally in favor of using all technologies to enhance, amplify, and distribute authentic human conversation, whether by accident or design. This little format we've got here, I think, is a great example of authentic human conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so Ron, Clive, me, a big thank you, and see you all next time. And let's continue the conversation.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.